Hello, DC. Thank you so much for having me. And just a quick round of applause for all the speakers today. It was, I know I get so much from all, so much learning from all the wonderful women that spoke, and also Kevin. Kevin's a cool guy. He wrote a book on meetings. He's a cool guy. Don't worry. So I'm going to do a talk today. I really wanted to call this talk The Greatest Redesign Ever Told, but legal kind of fought back on that, and I had to dumb it down. So it's called What's Changed and Where's It Going? And this talk is, it's sort of like a responsive web design refresher course. We are now kind of entering into the 10th year or 9th year of responsive web design. And I think it's a good time to kind of take a step back and reflect kind of on where we've been and where we're at now and where we're kind of going. And just this is sort of informed by a lot of the work I've been doing, rehabbing, not even redesigning, it's like rehabbing websites that I've been doing in the last couple of years. So I thought I would share some of those examples, but first, let's do a little history refresher, shall we? Let's go back to the year 2010. Just seeing that is so refreshing. Let's go. A blog post by Ethan Marcotte that then turned into a book in 2011, Responsive Web Design. In it, Ethan proposed kind of 3 techniques to kind of help us deal with the changing landscape. We were in a place where we were making desktop websites and M.dot websites, and we were poorly maintaining both of them. And Ethan's like, I got a trick for y'all. So he proposed in his book kind of 3 techniques: flexible grids, fluid media, and media queries. And you kind of smash those together, and you can make a website that works as well on a phone as it does on a desktop. It wasn't that simple, and I was so mad at Ethan right when it came out, because I had mastered pixel-perfect web design. But eventually, I picked up this technique, and I learned how it all worked. And at this point in 2010, 2011, responsive web design is very much a technique. It's just a technique that we apply to our websites. Oh, but it didn't stop there. Slowly, we learned, mobile, we should go think mobile first. So we were authoring we were squeezing our websites down to a phone. That was sort of how we were making responsive websites. And we said, oh no, we gotta do it the other way. We gotta make a phone website that grows up to a desktop website. We figured that out. A lot of us had to learn Sass to do our job, right? And then a lot of us, started experimenting with web fonts. Now we can put beautiful typography, historic typography on our websites. Never before were we able to do that. We literally had 5 fonts to make websites. Now we have infinite. Thank you, dafonts.com. And then we had to do our responsive web design responsibly. And kind of this gets into this idea of let's kind of really keep doing the progressive enhancement and kind of do it responsibly for all of our users. Oh, we don't have hover. We have touch now. What does it look like if we build our websites with touch? And then Ethan's like, you still don't get it. You idiots. Here's responsive web design part 2. A cheat sheet for you. And then, of course, I taught you how to make money doing responsive web design. And then Karen McGrain wrote a book called Going Responsive. And I think that this is a kind of a critical point in responsive web design's life, because Karen, through her work with consulting and her work on the Responsive Web Design podcast with Ethan, they interviewed a lot of companies who were making the transition to a responsive website. And Karen rightly figured out, hey, a lot of how we used to make websites doesn't work anymore. The old waterfall process, not so great. We have to kind of tighten up the communication loop. And a lot of companies, as they were making a responsive website or becoming a digital product, they started realizing this is not all working together. We need to kind of change our organization to match this new era of mobile or just a one web approach. So responsive web design sort of stops becoming just a technique, and it starts becoming more of a philosophy. I know I experienced that. But it didn't stop there. It just kept going. We had to learn Git to deploy our website. We had to learn SVG. It's images, but made with math. We had to learn JavaScript, all load. We had to learn JavaScript. We had to learn the stinking command line from like 1970s. Guess I use that now. Had to learn animation. We now have CSS animation that actually works, and so like we can do cool things. We had to learn how to put a web font on a web page because it's kind of not that easy. But but yeah, we had to learn how to put a web font on the web page. We had to remind ourselves, oh yeah, this internet's for everybody. It needs to be accessible. We had to learn a whole new layout, grid, or Flexbox even. That was new too in the last 10-ish years. We had to learn a whole new grid layout. And then whenever Rachel and Jen say that, we go, oh, it didn't work on IE. It's just part of the, it's what we have to do. Our websites can work offline now. We still aren't really good at, well, we can put web fonts on the page, but like we need to like make it look real nice, and Tim helps us out. Oh man, a whole book on how to put an image on a frickin' web page. Progressive web apps. Our websites now interact with the operating system. What is going on? And then the non-canon books about design systems. So we'll see if these take off. Don't know. But looking kind of at the data, right, you can kind of see this trend of complexity kind of growing and growing and growing and growing. So for that, I would like to flash back to the year 2014. And I choose this year for two reasons, really. 2014 is kind of the halfway point in this decade of responsive design. But this is also, I feel like, a year, like 2013, 2014, a year where a lot of organizations started actually building out their responsive website. They saw a couple big companies do it, or universities, and so they said, well, let's try this. I feel like it's in this era, kind of building up to the 2016 Google decision that they're going to rank based on responsive design, which really made it good. So from 2014 to now, like last month, the average mobile website, and we're only looking at mobile because we're mobile first people, right? Yeah, okay. The mobile first approach, the average mobile website has basically tripled in size from 560 kilobytes to nearly 1.7 megabytes. Yowza. That's okay, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, oh, the problem's JavaScript. JavaScript's the problem. Well, kinda. JavaScript has gone up about 200 kilobytes or so, about like 2.5x. It's like doubled, just more than doubled. That's a lot of JavaScript. And this is like the gzip transfer size. This is not the like total size on the device, like the memory footprint. This is like the gzip size. Let's look at CSS. Well, CSS isn't really doing much better. CSS has tripled in size since 2014. And I find this really curious because I don't feel like we have 3 times the number of design problems that we're solving. That's kind of weird. So I'd be really curious to dig into this and figure out what it is. Is it like frameworks? Is it just us being lazy? Like, I would even expect this to like go down in size because now browsers don't have vendor prefixes anymore. Like we don't need those. So like we actually should have less rules, but we don't. We have triple the amount of rules. Images. This is where most of it comes from. Images have gone up about 600 kilobytes or so in the last 5 years. We're sending more images in. And so I feel 2 ways about this, right? 2 conflicting ways. One, you absolutely have an image problem on your website. I just want to tell you that. I will bet you $100 I can find a like uncompressed image or like unoptimized image on your homepage right now. Bet you $100 I can. Number 2, not my fault, man. Friggin' retinas and triple retinas. That stuff happened to me. That's like an external factor that makes my website have to be like triple the size. In the area of like Instagram and Snapchat and things like that, like we have a lot of visual stuff that needs to happen. Like we kind of need to be visual brands, visual websites, kind of putting that forward because the web is such, or even apps, I'll call it just apps, is such a digital medium. We kind of need to kind of match that trend. So in some ways I feel like, this is not exactly our fault, but then at the same time I'm like, I can find an unoptimized image on your website. So go check that out. Quick note on kilobytes real quick. There's gzipped and unzipped. You'll hear like 2 stats. Usually when people try to look good, they'll give you the gzip stat. They'll say like, it's only 2 kilobytes. That's fine. Usually gzip refers to like the transfer speed, like how it goes over radio or wire. And unzip reflects the amount of like, I guess, time that the CPU is going to take after it unzips all that stuff and processes it, or even the maintenance costs. You know, if you're trying to maintain a 2 kilobyte library of JavaScript, that's easy. But if you're trying to maintain a like 200 kilobyte library that's unzipped, that's a big difference. Big difference in maintenance costs. And all bytes are not equal. JavaScript bytes that you have to download, get parsed, executed, and then cause a gigantic style recalculation on your website, that's more expensive than just a normal CSS byte. And JavaScript bytes are about 6x CSS bytes right now. And image bytes, like when you take a gigantic like wallpaper and you like compress it down to a phone, that's actually a lot of work for the phone to do that kind of in memory and like squeeze all those bytes down. So it's more expensive, not only on like the CPU, but also like on the battery. So I know what you're thinking, Dave. Here it goes, here's a zinger. Aren't these like gonna get better? Because connections are getting better, phones are getting better. I just paid $1,200 for a phone. It's getting better, right? Yeah, yes, but no. Let's look at the data. This is a great chart of DOM content loaded, which is basically like HTML. It says, I made it, dudes. What's next, you know? DOM content loaded happens, and this data set's really good because at first the data was merged, right? It was all together, and then at 2016 or so, they like split the data between mobile and desktop. And what do we see? We see the desktop kind of trending a little bit down. We see a big dip because like mobile got split out, but you see it trending down, and you see the mobile stats going up. We also see this on load, which is kind of like, oh, okay, I have everything you told me to get. I'm going to just make a website. That's what the browser says. And you see that like over the last 5 years, desktop sites have gotten 10% faster, while mobile sites have gotten 40 to 50% slower. So our websites are getting slower faster than devices are getting faster, if that makes sense. Like we're out crappying these miracle devices in our pockets. Something to think about. And why does this matter? Well, Google, DoubleClick, the money station of Google, they did a study and they found out 53% of visits are abandoned if a site takes more than 3 seconds to load. 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000, 50% of your customers are gone. Yikes. And how that kind of factors in is if you look at a chart, this is my chart, we're like right here at 18.6 seconds, and the money zone is right here. That's a big gap to fill. And there are like tricks you can do, like performance tricks to like perceive performance and loading to make it like all look faster, but this is a big disparity between what users want and what we're providing. So I thought I'd look at some examples on how like, and work we've done to like kind of work with clients and hopefully close the gap on some things, but really just kind of like our process in making websites and how we kind of approach websites and try to meet this gap. But I have 3 examples here, and I should say like, I'm gonna talk about one specifically, but really like, all of my experiences have more or less been the same. It's really kind of like the amalgamation of all these experiences coming together. And these are just 3 projects like I think I've worked on in the last year. One was a company called Koros. It's like a social media platform. And it started out, we are actually working for a company called Spreadfast. And it was for a 6-month contract or something like that to build a website, to rehab their old website. And like about 3 weeks into the project, they announced a merger with another company called Lithium. And we were like, well, that changes the project, doesn't it? And about 3 weeks later, they had a new creative director. Oh, that changes the project. 3 weeks later, dust had settled from the merger, we have a new CMO. Oh, that changes the project. And then about 3 weeks after that, they say, hey, okay, so we're not gonna go with one of the brands that are existing, we're gonna invent a whole new brand. Ah, that changes the project. But here's the catch. We still need a website in March, at the end of your 6-month contract. But we don't get the branding until February for the new company. Whoa. Well, we did it, got some gray hairs in the process, but we built a design system, and then when the branding came, we kind of projected like what elements we'd probably need, like marketing-y things. And then when the branding finally arrived, we were able to kind of skin these quickly and get a website built and out the door, and they're using it today. Next was Austin Chamber of Commerce, site we worked on. This site, the Chamber of Commerce sites end up kind of being a lot like university sites or nonprofit sites. They collect a lot of information because their job is to kind of drum up business for the city, right? So they have a lot of posts, a lot of pages, a lot of everything. And we worked with them kind of trying to get the contents in the right buckets. That was a big part of the project. But what we did is we made a design system for them. It took about 3 months-ish, to do that, and we handed it off to a development team, and they took about 3 months-ish to integrate that into their CMS. And in about 6 months or so, we had a website. What's cool about this is, they stopped asking us for design help at some point. And they were like, oh, hey, we built a whole page using the components you provided. Hope that's cool. And we were like, yeah. They're your components. That's cool. And the last project was for a small pizza company out of Kentucky. Elephant in the room. This is a company, Papa John's is a company that's gone through a lot of changes in the last couple of years. Like apparently Shaq is on the board now and he visits the office. I don't know, I'm remote. I don't get no Shaq. That's the consequence of being a remote employee. But one thing I think I've learned through this whole kind of process is, I think what you read in the headlines and everything, and y'all might know this from like government work or something like that. Sometimes what you read in the headlines doesn't really match your experience on a project or the diverse team of people you work with. And so it can be hard to reconcile those things and hard to get through. But just talking through team members and managers and everything, I think you can find a place to still feel productive and do good work. Another reason I wanted to bring up Papa John's, not just because I worked on this site, but I feel like it makes a pretty good case study. This site was actually designed by HappyCog back in about 2013, 14-ish, and it was handed off. And then slowly, over time, it was, grew and grew, and people kind of worked and grew, and it grew, and it grew. How much did it grow, Dave? Well, 1 megabyte of CSS and 1 megabyte of JavaScript sent down to the client. Wow. And this all gzips, don't worry, to about 256 kilobytes and 300 kilobytes of JavaScript. But there's about 37,000 lines of CSS. This is really hard to work in. It's kind of like anytime you want to change a button, you have 37,000 landmines you might step on. It's really, really difficult to work in. And we try to explain, it's really difficult to work in. Let's make you a design system, and it might be a lot easier. So that's kind of the thing we sort of undertook. We were like, well, we got to figure out a way to manage this CSS, because I've quite literally never seen this much CSS in my whole entire life. So let's go like manage this CSS. And step one, and this is going to sound like the classic design system story, so buckle up, here we go. We did an interface inventory. We found all the buttons on the site. We found about 32-ish buttons. What's interesting is about 20 of them were green buttons. There are about 20 different green buttons with different padding, different shades, different button like text, different font weights, 20 different green buttons. Why? I don't know. Somebody felt like riffing. 14 different product cards, which is kind of ironic or unexpected for a company that more or less sells like one product. Kind of raises an eyebrow there. And there were a lot of these. There were like 3 footers, 5 headers, things like that, just as we kind of went through the whole site. So the second step is actually, this is maybe something you haven't seen before, measuring. Because I'm a nerd, I like to get some numbers, get some data. And I like to use this tool, cssstats.com. Anyone use it? They just redesigned recently. It's a really good tool to kind of analyze your CSS and get like a 10,000 foot view of what's going on in your site. And here you can see it's 5,000 rules, 10,000 selectors. That means every rule has like 2 comma selectors, right? Or more. 16,000 declarations, that's like rules, style properties. 711 font sizes. Woof. That's a lot. 75 background colors. There's like 1 background color. This is weird. That's a lot. And 334 floats. That's difficult. And 41 unique colors for a company that more or less has 3 brand colors, like white, red, and green. So that's a lot of colors. So I got these stats. I'll probably come back to these here. And then I ran it through Lighthouse. This is actually a dev environment, but you can kind of get some numbers. They're not the best, but there's some numbers. We can make those numbers go up. I love making numbers go up. And just a real quick thing, while we're talking about taking Lighthouse score, anyone use Lighthouse? You really should. Crack open your Chrome DevTools, point it at your website, and try it out. But we have rules here in this crowd. In this house, we don't trust vanity metrics, and we run our sites at mobile slow, like 4x slow down the CPU, okay? We don't cheat. We're tough people. We don't cheat on this. We don't go for the vanity. We go for the real score. So once we have our real scores, our real data, best we can do, we patternize, right? Build out the patterns. We built a style guide, design system, pattern library, whatever you want to call it. We got the colors down to about 16 colors, and like half of those are grayish colors, grayish. And then, of course, we tackled the button problem. We took our 32 buttons and got it down to about 9. There's maybe like 2 or 3 other ones there, just kind of rando. Got it down. Feels pretty good. I mean, this is just a matrix, right? 3 sizes, 3 different kind of states or meanings or conveyances. And then we took the product cards and we got it down to about 5 different product cards, kind of each with distinct meanings. There's like a product card, like a single pizza card, or a feature like marketing items, those sort of things that creep into the website. A banner card, a big thing, like the big thing you want to show off, right? The special offer card, which is kind of like the special, the meal deal, the pack that you want to offer. And then like a hero offer card, which goes under the hero unit. And that's more like a modified version of that special card, very similar, but it could be used for other things like their Papa Rewards program or something like that. So and there may be a couple other cards lingering there in the site or the design system, but this is kind of the core, the heavy lifters of the design system. And then step 4, after you make your design system and start rolling out pieces of it, measure some change. We ended up with about 28 different components that powers the whole site. We ended up with about 67 total variants. So if you think of like an alert success, an alert default, an alert purple, or whatever, like they're all the same component. They're just flavored a little bit differently. And then in our design system, we built out 105 pages of the site. And we feel very strongly that your design system also needs to have target pages that you're building against. I'll give you kind of two reasons. One, you know, a lot of people will come and they'll be like, oh, you made a prototype. I'm like, no, I made a test case. Like this, if I change the button, I have 105 different pages I can look at to see if I messed them up. And to some degree of confidence, I know like, oh, this component exists on page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I can just go check those 5 pages. The next reason is this helps inform a lot of discussions. You know, I think with any design system, you know, a lot of people kind of want to come up and be like, oh, the design system doesn't work. And you're like, well, that's interesting. It worked 105 times before. What's your problem? Or like, well, maybe we can have a conversation. Like, and we can have a starting point to kind of have a conversation and evolve a conversation. You know, if you just don't like it, that's totally fine. Like, let's add to it. Let's remove it. Let's do something different. And I have some more data. This is from a command line tool called Source Map Explorer. If you've ever used Webpack Analyzer, it's very similar. But you chuck your source maps at this tool, and it'll spit out what's called a tree map of your site. And before, you can see the 1 mega file, and it's just kind of blah. And then after, you can see our file, and it's 100 kilobytes. The top part is all of our components, and the bottom part is all of our utilities. You'll see that big brick that says animation. I think that's actually a mistake. I think like some like third-party library got like sucked into the source map somehow. Regardless, that top half is very interesting to me because now I kind of have some data, right? Now I kind of know if I have 28 components that end up being 56 of my CSS kilobytes. Well, I know now, easy math, every component is about 2 kilobytes. That's pretty cool. Every variant, 800 bytes. So now I can kind of estimate if somebody wants a new feature or something like that. I can kind of look at my data and kind of estimate what that impact is going to have on the design system. Looking at the before and after, here we go. Drum roll, please. Let's see how we did. This is the design system. And you can see we reduced the total file size by 91%, from 100 kilobytes, or 1 megabyte, sorry, down to 100 kilobytes. In gzip, that's about 14 kilobytes. We reduced our selectors 91%, our font sizes 83%, our background colors are 63%. 28 still seems very high to me. Floats down 99%. Thank you, Flexboxing Grid. You're big helpers. Unique colors down 69%. That's good. A lot less colors, a lot less variance. But what's interesting is I was looking at this and I was like, oh wait, there's 3 colors that are repeated, like pound 33333 and then pound 333. So what did I do? I ripped them out. We're at 75% now. I'm just that petty. And looking at the Lighthouse score, we can kind of see, you know, it's hard to kind of see, but in the middle there, you see like 2 check marks, and it goes up to 3 check marks and 2 yellows, and well, it's still got 1 red. And again, these are on the dev environment, so this is kind of before like all the third-party scripts and stuff come in. So, and actually before even the CDN comes in, so it can kind of get better or worse. You kind of don't know, but I like to kind of measure what I can and A/B what I can. What's interesting, if you look at that first CPU idle, which is like finally the CPU can go, well, putting it on our graph, first CPU idle was here, and we got it down to here. And what's nice about Lighthouse is it gives you this little opportunities section. And it tells you exactly what's wrong with your website and exactly how much time it thinks it can like beef up your website. Eliminate render blocking resources. That's fonts and like modernizer. Remove unused CSS. That's fonts. I think it thinks our fonts are unused. Defer off-screen images. Like an image lazy loader. I get that. Serve next-gen image formats. That's actually going to be handled by our CDN when it gets to the cloud. Pre-connect to required origins. all right, like that could be useful. There's a lot of like third-party origins, but like maybe, if we connect to the ones that are critical to rendering content, that might actually make it faster. So if we look at our graph again, we were here. If we follow the advice from Lighthouse, oh ho ho, we're in the money zone. And life's different. It's hard to get stuff on the old Scrum schedule, but we'll work on it. Keep working on it. Try to make it faster and faster and faster. That's what I like to do. Managing JavaScript. Oh boy, I told you all about the 1 megabyte JavaScript. What's nice about JavaScript, in the last, 5-10 years, the JavaScript ecosystem has kind of matured and standardized on NPM as a package delivery format. And a package is basically like, instead of you going to a website and downloading a zip file and then extracting that zip file and then copying and pasting those files into your project file folder with a terrible name, NPM is just like a tool, a command line tool that will install things for you. And what's neat about it, and maybe bad about it, is it'll not only just install things, but it'll install the things that that thing needed to install, and that those things needed to install, and that those things needed to install. Very quickly, you have about 1,000 packages, but hey, at least it's organized. And what it does is it generates this file called package.json, and the only part I really care about is this dependencies, because this tells you what your app is requiring to run. This is what it requires to run. These are the base JavaScript elements that is running. And then in your JavaScript file, right, you import the thing you need from the thing you need. You write your JavaScript however you want to write it. And then you export. JavaScript has developed a system called ES modules of imports and exports, right? This is cool. This is cool. You're importing and exporting. It's pretty simple. That makes sense to me. But we didn't have that. Nope. We had a 1 megabyte jQuery app, which is just like looking at a bowl of spaghetti and saying, yeah, that looks useful. So I looked at that bowl of spaghetti, and I used an app called Notion, which is like a note-taking app, but it has a little spreadsheet feature that's kind of powerful. It's very sort of similar to Airtable. If you use Airtable, you can kind of like make associations and data and tag things and stuff like that. So I went through all 67 files. I found a little unique identifier, something I could look through the code base to figure out how many times that thing was being used. I counted how many times that thing was being used. I counted the dependencies, tried to figure out who does, in a jQuery app, you just include the files in the right order, and that's how execution happens, but that's not really great, because what if one's out of order? So I tried to figure out the order there, and then the file size and things like that. And I discovered some things that you might not need anymore that are related to responsive design here. Like a match media polyfill. Anyone ever seen this? You don't need it anymore. All browsers, on the average matrix, has that, like IE 11, 10 or 11 plus. Respond.js was a little library to add media queries to IE6 to IE8. You don't need those anymore if you're IE9 plus. Modernizer? I don't think you need it anymore. I mean, with CSS supports being such a powerful feature, I'm not really sure you need that anymore. Picture fill, contentious. You technically need it for IE 11, but maybe you don't. Just get rid of it, see if you feel better. HTML5 Shiv, that's shipped with the very popular HTML5 boilerplate. You don't need that anymore. All the browsers have the HTML5 now. Fast Click was a cool tool that used to hijack the 300 millisecond tap delay that was on mobile Safari. Guess what? You don't need that anymore. That delay's been removed. Load CSS was like a critical CSS companion that you do your critical CSS and then you use load CSS to load that. You don't need that anymore. I found that out last week or something. You just can do this on error. Okay, load the file. It's helpful. Web Font Loader was a tool to load web fonts, but guess what? We have font display swap now. You ain't need it. Require.js was a little thing of JavaScript that you'd use to load more JavaScript. You ain't need that. We have ES6 modules now. And finally, jQuery. Oh boy. I put this on here because the jQuery, very helpful for a time. I want to honor that. But a lot of the problems it solved are now in the browser, like query selector all. Animations can be handled by CSS animations, like has class, class list, whatever. Like these are all in the browser now. So you kind of, I feel personally like, what's the word if you're a doctor and you do a bad thing? Malpractice? Sort of feels like malpractice to prescribe jQuery or like write jQuery to me. Because it's sort of like this like, you don't need it, it's just adding extra bytes. Like let's try to move away from it. That's sort of how I feel about jQuery. However, you look at the JavaScript thing, like all of those things require jQuery. And like looking at that data freight or the freight thing, that's actually kind of one big thing, because that was like a little script that you'd add some HTML attributes or attributes to your links and stuff, and it would go do an AJAX call and then come back and then do whatever you told it to do after that call. We were using that 391 times in the app. And you start counting, you're like 391 occurrences, 1 hour of my time to fix it, 1 hour of like QA, right? Oh man, real quick math, that's 20 weeks of work to like replace one file and we still have a jQuery app. Yikes. But that helped inform some conversations, because maybe we shouldn't just be replacing jQuery. Maybe we need to look at a framework or something, a JavaScript framework, to help kind of manage some of our mess. On Shop Talk Show, we talk about JS frameworks quite a bit, but I like to refer to them as DOM managers, because JS frameworks has a little bit of a bad name. I like to call them DOM managers because they help you make sense of your components and your code. But here's what I'd like to say. That which is not managed grows. CSS has a bad rep, kind of like, oh, it just grows and grows and grows. And it does. It grew 3x in the last 5 years. JavaScript, 2 grows and grows. It grew 2.5x in the last 5 years. You need to find a way to manage your CSS in JavaScript. NPM is a way to do that, just to manage your dependencies. But you also need to like inventory and measure. You need to do those steps. You need to inventory and measure. CSS, the same thing. I think building a design system, a pattern library, is not like, you don't have to do it, but man, does it help you if you're like trying to manage your CSS. So, I wanted to talk real quick about rolling out a design system, because that's what we've been doing, and I think that's a part of responsive web design here in the year 2K19. Responsive design systems is when like a group of people come together and assemble some patterns, do a puzzle. And I've seen it go every way. I've seen a team of people push something to the cloud in 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, and then they're just happy. They just loved it. I've also seen people make a design system, and then just as they're about to put it in the cloud, oh no, we have to put out a fire. And then you're about to go back to the design system, and then you're about to put it out, and then oh no, somebody had a big idea, now we have to do that. And I've also seen, okay, we're about to put out the design system, and then you've lost some people along the way, and the new people are like, why don't we just use Bootstrap? And you're just like, And here's the thing. The puzzle pieces, that's not the hard part. Like, we can do that. It's the people part, right? And I always think about this thing from Melvin Conway, Conway's Law. He's an old computer science guy. Organizations which design systems, that's the key word, are constrained to produce designs which are copies of the communication structures of these organizations. Or, as I like to put it, your website is a manifestation of your organization's problems. And this helps me understand a lot. Why do 2 pages on the website look differently? Oh, those 2 departments don't talk to each other. Or one values design and one doesn't, right? Why is it like I don't know, why why does everything spin around on this page? Well, the designer maybe had too much power. They maybe have too much power in the waterfall. I don't know. There's a lot of, our websites are kind of artifacts of our organizations, and I think it shows. And I would go so far to say, like, any successful design system that I've seen roll out usually has buy-in from somebody up top who kind of controls the product, the engineering, and the design holistically, and they're bought into this idea of a design system. So let's fast forward to this year, 2019, and take a look at the state of the union, right? Frameworks, JavaScript frameworks. Is anyone using a JavaScript framework? Just kind of show of hands. Okay, quite a few people. Angular, React, Vue. They are made by Google, Facebook, and a guy named Evan You, respectively. I like the indie option. These are incredibly popular, right? And what's interesting about JavaScript frameworks is they are solving the design system problem from the JavaScript side. It is all about components for these folks. It's about, we have design components and CSS components, and they have JavaScript components. And these systems kind of work to do that. If you look at like a traditional HTML structure, right? We put our Sass in a Sass folder, and there's 100 things in there. And then we have a JS folder, and we have our JavaScript in there, and we have an index.html, and we put our HTML. This is the classic kind of separation of concerns. I still use this. But Angular kind of comes along, and it's like, hey, I got a different idea. We're going to do like a folder of components. And then each component will have its own folder, and then in each folder is going to be like the HTML, the CSS, the JavaScript test, that's the spec file, and then the TypeScript file, that's their version. It's JavaScript with static types, but that's what they use to kind of organize their code. And the React community, React doesn't prescribe as many rules, right? But React is maybe more like, the React community is a lot more like, hey, we're just going to all do this in a JavaScript file. And it's sort of the same thing. You have your JavaScript, you import some styles. This is sort of the CSS and JS. This is actually using CSS modules, sort of the syntax. But you have the JavaScript, and then you spit out the HTML. It's not actually HTML, it's called JSX. And anyway, it's similar, HTML-ish, and it spits out your HTML, and it's usually all in one file. Vue, which I like, and Sarah talked about earlier today, kind of does this other thing, and it creates this thing called a Vue component file. And everything's inside this file, but your template is set up in a template part, that's your HTML. Your script goes in your script part, that's your script. And your style goes in your style part, and that's your style. I like this very much. And then in all these systems, this is handed off to Webpack or Rollup or something, and then that kind of churns through, dissects the file, and spits it out in some combination of like either just a style tag or inline styles, or maybe it even generates a style sheet. You can do that now. Like there's a lot of different, the output is sort of up to you, but you have to also configure that, kind of how that works. But what I like about it is they're kind of iterating on this separation of concerns and doing it in different ways. I think there's maybe something to learn there. I'm kind of trying to keep an open mind to it. There's other buzzwords like Jamstack, JavaScript, APIs, markup. It's basically you just write, you can write HTML and then use JavaScript to fetch it cool stuff from a server. And GraphQL is like a query language. Like it used to be you'd hit like a REST API, right? And you'd go say, hey, give me all the whatever actors, and then once I get all the actors, I'm going to go through each actor and get all the movies they've been in, and then that's expensive. but GraphQL is like kind of like you can structure your query, all the information you want on the client, and as long as you set your database up to like handle that, you can just from your client go get the data you want without bothering like a backend developer to like go code something for you. Kind of useful. And serverless is another buzzword I'm very interested in. You can kind of like if you think about like we've moved templating to the client, right, through JavaScript frameworks, and we've got these GraphQLs. I don't need a Rails guy anymore to write Rails code. You start thinking, oh, maybe the server needs to do less. Maybe it doesn't even need to be automatically running every minute of every day. And that's sort of what serverless means. It just means an on-demand server. So you hit it, you spin it up, and it goes, gets the data you want, and sends that back to you, and then it turns off. It's a lot cheaper to run that way. But I don't want to get into all that. Those are all separate talks, right? But another thing that's happening in 2019 is mobile has hit the tipping point. Looking at Mary Meeker's Internet Trends report, you can see time on mobile device is just ballooning. What's interesting is it's not really eating away at our time on our laptop and our desktops. We're just doing more. It's just more, triple more. I'm not going to judge because I'm like upper echelon of this chart here. But one thing I noticed in her report this year, is mobile time spent on mobile is now more than television. Huge. That's huge, and that's going to affect ad spends and all those sort of things. So the tipping point, and even what I'm seeing in client data is like it's mobile, overwhelmingly mobile. And when I think about that, oh man, my whole perspective changes. I get actually weird conspiracy theories like no font should ever be over 20 pixels. Whoa, think about it, man. Why would you ever need more than 20 pixels? You don't. No, don't listen to me. But the big thing about mobile, the tipping point is, we're here. And the money's here, and we have to close that gap. So when I think about mobile first, I think this is the gap we have to close. So let's go to, real quick, we'll just go to the year 2024. 5 years in the future, why not? Zoom, 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 here we go. These are technologies I'm excited about. Web components. Anyone heard of web components? Yes? Okay. Web components are an attempt to build that JavaScript component stuff into the browser. Sounds kind of handy, might save you some CPU cycles. And here's kind of how it's a long storied history, so I'm going to give you a brief little history. In the first iteration, it was like this HTML file. I love HTML. You have a template with a style tag, and you write your button or whatever. And then you have a little bit of script to kind of add a life cycle, and then you register the component. Easy peasy. And then you would import that HTML file into your HTML file, and then you could use that HTML. Great, let's ship it. But then Firefox is like, nah, we hate HTML imports. I remember it clear as day, December 15th, 2014. They kind of advocated for, we're going to see how this JavaScript module stuff shakes out, and we don't want to do it. And that more or less killed the HTML import side of web components and made them a lot less useful in my mind. Web components, take two, let's go. Here's kind of how you write a web component now. Polymer has kind of made this thing called lit HTML. It's sort of like kind of a small wrapper around web components to make them more useful. And this, you have a class, my button, and you return HTML, right? This looks a lot like that React component, doesn't it? It's very similar. And then the way they do it is you kind of do a script type module, and then you put your module in, and then you can render out your button in your HTML. All right, that's pretty cool, I guess. If I'm going to be honest with you, web components are kind of meh right now. They're not that useful. They were designed for framework authors, right? They were designed for be a low-level API for framework authors to build frameworks upon. And then none of the framework authors built frameworks upon it. So whoops. There are some frameworks, like Lightning Web Components is from Salesforce. They just launched last month or so. But it's Salesforce is like, oh, we can't build like a React system and an Angular system and a Vue system and like whatever, backend PHP CMS system. We can't build all those. So we'll just offer these web components, and you can convert them or stitch them up however. In React, you can import web components even. So they kind of were like, let's take the kind of easiest path, and we'll just build this base fundamental and kind of offer that. But what I am excited about, and this is where the year 2024 comes in, is there's two proposals on the web component table that I would like you to really tweet about and get excited about. HTML template instantiation from Apple. Apple started taking a look at the web component spec and just said, hey, let's add if statements and for loops in HTML natively. You don't need PHP anymore. This is great. Let's do this. I'm excited that Apple is getting involved in this spec where historically it's just been Chrome. And Edge has proposed the Unity component specification. The Unity component module, this is on Sean Larkin's GitHub. He's from Webpack. He has basically proposed a syntax that looks exactly like a Vue component to import files, and then you can import that into JavaScript, and JavaScript knows how to use it, or you can import that into HTML, and HTML knows how to use it. I love this. I want it. Let's put it in the browser today. So web components have the potential to be great. I don't know that they're super great right now, but they have the potential to be great. Another thing I'm excited about is WebAssembly. WebAssembly is weird, but I'll try to give you a high-level thing about it. It's basically you can compile like C++ code into the browser, into something the browser understands. And this is really weird, but there's a lot of code, there's a lot of applications, a lot of powerful technology that was written in stuff that doesn't work on the web. And WebAssembly gives this old code and everything an opportunity to live again on the web. And the quintessential example is like image optimizers, right? Like an image optimization, if you were to try to do this with JavaScript and Canvas, that would be awful. But there's all these image optimization libraries written in C and C++ that we can, like Image Magic, that you can chuck code at. And Squoosh App from Google, it does this. It just basically has these WebAssembly things. So you upload an image, the image goes through the WebAssembly and comes back and it's smaller. And it happens in seconds, not days like it would with JavaScript. Another cool demo I saw just like literally like last week. This is from Lorenzo Katamuro, doing water-based physics in the browser. One thing that JavaScript is bad at is math, and this takes a lot of math. This in JavaScript would melt your computer to the bone. But this is just a fluid animation. Like all the math is done by WebAssembly, and then all the rendering is handed over to WebGL. It's pretty killer. And maybe the most killer feature I've ever seen done is this was from Google. They're just talking about it in some video, YouTube or something. And this is Squoosh, or Perception Toolkit. It's actually in Chrome. And it's basically like an AI in the browser that you can program. You can program an AI in the browser to like scan a barcode or scan a logo, and it'll like pop up a link to a URL or something like that. You could think about it in an e-commerce like sort of situation. You like scan a product and it shows you the price. Something like that. You can train a model on your phone or whatever and hand it and program it however you want. What I think is cool about this, and this is where the WebAssembly came in, is they were talking just casually and they're like, oh, and for browsers that don't support this perception toolkit, we built it in WebAssembly. Like we built a polyfill in WebAssembly for this new browser feature that you can use. Oh ho ho. Polyfills for future stuff in browsers. This could be very cool future for browsers. So WebAssembly, I think, will make websites more powerful. And the last thing I'd like to talk about is CSS Houdini. Who's heard of Houdini? Yes, a few people. Okay. Houdini is cool. Houdini lets you, this is not the official logo. Houdini gives you the ability to control the painting and compositing and layout of a website. What does that even mean? Well, there's a site called Houdini Rocks, CSS Houdini Rocks. And here you can see it's just a site, but they're controlling the painting, the rough edges, and they're passing CSS variables over to the browser, and they're controlling the paint rendering. That's not an image. It's actually kind of like a canvas element, sort of, that's injected or layered in. But you can control the browser and how it paints objects. We're not just limited to squares and rectangles anymore. This is a grid. Are you tired of websites looking so like gritty? Well, here you go. Irregular grids. Let's just mess it up. Let's just mess it up entirely. And these are just variables they're adjusting, and they're handing this off to like a script that's controlling how the browser renders things. There's going to be a lot of possibilities here. I can see the gears turning in people's head. And here's this. I'm sure you've seen masonry, like if you've ever been on Pinterest. Masonry layouts, kind of where the blocks sort of fill and stack however they can, right? Wouldn't it be cool? You can do that in the browser, but it's very expensive. It's like very harsh on the browser, very slow in JavaScript, and very just not great. But this is like 50 lines of code. We are hitting the performance threshold that mobile would need to render a site. So I'm very excited about this and the possibilities here. I don't actually think like I'm going to be able to do it, but I'm depending on people like you to write cool things that I can just send variables to. That looks like fun. I have the feeling that Houdini will make websites unique again, because we're kind of in an age where all the websites look the same. Hopefully we can break out of that. So before I go, I got one thing I'd like to say, and that is mobile first, once more with feeling. If you've gotten anything from my site, or my talk here, is just my website, my talk, is I think we really need to evaluate how we think of websites and how we think of mobile in that interaction. I mean, Luke Wroblewski talked about it like, 8 years ago, but like, I think the time has come and the tipping point has happened, and we need to be way, way, way more mobile first and close that gap. So thank you very much.